Hey everybody, so if you have an LG dryer like this and you want to fix a squeaking sound or anything like that, any kind of sounds really, I'll show you the kit that you can use to replace everything, and then you don't have to worry about taking it apart again to see what the heck's making that sound. You can just take it apart, change everything, and not have to worry about doing it over and over. So the kit I bought was just a kit off Amazon, and this is the first time I think I've used this kit, but here's the number off of it. So it comes with 4 rollers with the shafts on them, which is what we want because I had already cleaned up this dryer, taken the rollers off, cleaned up the shafts, sanded them down, and it still didn't get rid of the noise that it was making. It's less, but it's not 100%, and that's, if I'm going to sell something, it's going to be 100% when it leaves here. So I just bought this kit to see how this guy works. So it comes with the idler, which is really the rollers, and the idler are the only moving parts in this dryer. The motor, of course, turns, but yeah, the motor's not making any sounds. And it comes with a belt. So that's everything you could possibly want to change in a dryer that's noisy. These parts are what you change for any dryer that's making sound. So I'll do a little bit of the teardown. I've already got another video on this exact dryer for teardown, so maybe I'll just list that up here so you can watch that if you want to learn how to tear it down. But I'll show you the basics on how to tear down and how to change these parts. Okay, so I don't have my toolkit on me, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to use just the tools I have in my garage, which is the tools that most people have. They're just a standard screwdriver set, a couple of crescent wrenches, a pair of pliers maybe. So first thing we do, always unplug it. We're going to need a Phillips screwdriver. Just trying to find one that'll be big enough. That one will do, just a star. So yeah, unplug it. And then pull this out from the wall just a little bit, just to get to these screws on the back. There's 3 on this guy. So 3 screws. You don't want to take off the ones that are up higher on this bracket. You want to take off the ones that are lower. Because if you take off the ones that are higher on this bracket, you still can't slide the top back, which is what you need to do in order to take the top off. Everything on this machine is done through the front. So once we get this, the bracket will come with the top, and we can slide the whole thing back and get to the screws for the console. So move this back a little bit. So you just push back on the top and it will slide back. Getting it off at this point, sometimes it just kind of falls off, depends how sloppy everything is in there, but you just kind of wiggle it around, get those screws to let that piece come up. So basically we got to take off the console, take off the front panel. There's a bunch of other things kind of in there too that we'll deal with while ripping this apart. So I'll just take you guys through it. Maybe what I'll actually do is grab my drill so we can make this a little bit quicker. You can use a drill too if you wanted to do that. But you'll, like I said, there's that other video I made that you can reference if you need somebody to take it a little bit more slow, which is fine. This can be a real pain in the butt when you're doing it the first time. So once you get that console off, there's another screw. sometimes LG has this other screw that they run for the back of the console that holds on the whole thing. Sometimes it's not there. You'll have to see on yours whether that's a thing or not. So there's these little tabs that have to be kind of pried off there. The wiring for the console is going to be a pain because this bracket that's in behind here doesn't want to let the console go. So sometimes you got to fight with that a little bit. Now, at this point, you could undo all the connections to the board. I usually just undo this one that's on the far side here because it seems to be the shortest one. And then put this up here just for now while we undo the screws for the bracket, and then we can move the whole thing back and get it out of the way. So the next piece that has to come off is this, the whole front panel here. I usually undo the screws for the bracket at the same time. It's a lot easier to take this bracket off when this panel is taken off already. So I usually just take that panel off. So a couple screws across the top here. There'll be 2 screws inside of here. This is with every dryer. These screws will be here. And you just have to take off the 2 bottom ones. At this point, there's little holders that hold this panel from falling forward. But if yours are bent or something like that, watch this, because this whole thing can come falling towards you. So just get it off those little clips, undo the door switch, and we'll move this panel out of the way. And then we've already taken off the screws mostly from this panel. So take off that one. Now that's all the screws that are holding that on. You just lift up and pull it out. It just sits in a little recess there. So now with that loose, we can move both of these back a ways. You'll have to undo the wiring from these little catches here because we'll be taking this panel off too. So I always kind of just rest it where I can. I end up usually moving it 3 or 4 times. We're going to have to take the drum out too, so this is going to have to move again. But deal with that when we get back there. So this piece, 4 screws on the side. And then you'll have to look underneath the blower part that comes down under here. Sometimes there's 1 or 2 screws there. Sometimes there's none. This guy, there is nothing there. So there'll be a screw actually holding this assembly to the rest of the blower assembly in behind it. So we take those off and get those out of the way. So this just lifts up and out just like that console did, but because it has the rollers on the bottom, they tend to catch on the bottom of the drum. So this one can be a little bit of a pain to get out of there. Just take your time with it. It's not anything crazy. There is a wiring connection down below. I just took that off, but you'll have to get that off too. Just a regular connection you can just push in and pull out. So these are the 2 front rollers. We're going to change them. They're good, but we're going to change them anyway, just because we're going to be in here. So put that aside for now. We'll do it when we're putting it all back together. Okay. So turn this console like something like that, where it's not going to fall down. Then we can pull that drum out. I have, in that other video I made, a pretty good close-up of pulling that belt off. So take a look at that, and yeah, you'll get a pretty good picture of what it takes to pull this guy off. So I'll just do that now, and we can get that drum pulled out of there. I usually just grab it by the belt. Yeah, that console's gonna be a real jerk. So we want to make sure that the console's not going to fall. Is that belt that we're going to be changing? Because electronics don't like to be hit. So we'll move this out of the way for now. What we're going to work on is those rear rollers. So these have a nut on them. That is the back. So when you take the old ones off, first of all, match them up with the ones you're going to be putting on. Make sure that they are the right ones, because they do make a couple different styles. So we want to put the right ones on. You can use 2 crescent wrenches. I usually do, because I a lot of the time don't know what size that nut is going to be on the back. On this guy, I know it's a 14 mil, but I've gotten so used to using crescent wrenches that it's just easier for me. So the one on that right side there, because the heater's in the way, it kind of makes it a pain. So you can take a couple screws off the front of this heater that secure it to the base, and you can move that whole assembly kind of out of the way. You can just leave all the wires and everything connected to it. Maybe we'll do that now, and we'll get that heater out of the way. It's ridiculously in the way when you're trying to get to the nut on the back of that guy, because it's behind this panel here. So you have to kind of get in behind this little tiny cutout here, which is not the easiest. So yeah, you just lift up on the front of that. There'll be a little tab on the back here that we want to get unhooked, and then this whole assembly will come out. There's little clips that hold down the wiring down here, so we can get the wires pulled through those to give you even more room. And when you have that heater out, take a look at right here, because we do not want all of that stuff to be in there. That's a lot of stuff just sitting there ready to burn, and we don't want that. So I'm going to get you guys a little bit closer so you can see a little bit better what's going on. Okay, so get you a little closer there. So this is never an easy thing. Sometimes the nut from in behind will kind of catch, and you don't need to hold it yet. So I always try to see if this whole thing will turn. Nope. Without holding on to that nut, but it's not going to. And this is really on there. So I might have to get an actual wrench that's that size for this one. Usually you don't have to. Usually it's always just a crescent wrench, but sometimes you run into crap like this, and that is appliance repair. Okay, so the end of this this guy is actually 10 millimeter. So I got a 10 mil wrench. Hopefully it'll bust loose. It does not want to. So we're gonna have to use a little trick that I learned a while ago. Grab another wrench. All right, so I've got a 9/16 wrench here. Hopefully that's, well, yeah, bust it loose. So it's spinning now. You can put your hand on the back and you can tell, yeah, that Um, the nut is spinning back there. So, a 9/16 will fit on the back of that nut. It's a little sloppy, but that's kind of nice because there's not much room in there anyway. But yeah, you'll see it's not tough. You just got to get something on that nut, and it's in such a crappy spot that it makes it a little, I guess, tougher to do. So nut and washer on the back side of this panel, and just a washer on the front side. So grab the new one, which comes with a nut. But as you can see, it only comes with one washer. So the washer, it kind of seems a little flimsy too. It doesn't seem as big or as thick as these other ones. So I'm going to use a washer off the old one. That's not going to make any kind of difference. It'll just be a little more support for this guy. So putting this on the back, that is the fun part, because you have to hold the washer and the nut at the same time. I just get it lined up with the hole that I can see through the front here, and then screw this on. Usually you got to wiggle it around a little bit, and the nut that's actually on here is a bit of a lock nut. So when you get it on, it's not going to spin on all the way. So you're going to have to get it on just as far as you can get it with your fingers. And then put the wrench on the back of that guy, and we'll spin this in. So there's not a heck of a lot to it. It's just trying to line up everything is a bit of a pain, but so I'll make that nice and tight. And sometimes this panel will bend a little bit. Make sure you try not to do that. If you do, try to get it back kind of as straight as you can. These ones aren't too bad because they're actually screwed right here and here. A lot of the dials like Samsung don't have these screws, so you can bend that panel way out. Just watch that. So get this guy out of the way. Grab those other the idler and the other roller, and change those out. Okay, so with that idler also there is a spring that's going to have to go on the idler to keep the tension on the belt. So when you're changing the idler, it's more or less the same kind of deal as the rollers. It's just got one bolt going through it. The bolt goes right through here, and then screws into the back of this motor mount here. So maybe we'll do that, and I'll show you guys that. It's kind of a tough spot to see into. Still more fuzz in here. Jeez. I dried a couple towels the other day, and for some reason this dryer tends to really hold on to the fluff. So same thing, 10 mil. And sometimes these can be a bit of a pain to break loose too, but this one wasn't too bad. I know the idler's fine in this one, but like I said, I'm gonna replace it anyway, just because we're in here and it doesn't hurt. So when you take that idler off, make sure that everything looks the same. These little tabs on the end here, make sure that those are the same. The bends and everything kind of have to be the same. Where the spring hooks onto here should be the same. Yeah, they are identical. The this is the replacement for it. So we can put that on. We may as well change the spring because we have one. So when you're putting on the spring, make sure you hook it on from the same direction that you took it off on, because that will make a difference. Okay, so it's going to be going like that. We want this spring hooked in here. All right. So if you notice, there's a couple split spots that you can actually put that spring on. Just trying to see where you took yours off of. Lining this up is a bit of a pain most of the time. Those little tabs that were on the back, these guys are here, are going to hook under this little switch. Has an arm on it. Now those have to be on the right side of the arm. So when you're taking it off, either take a picture or just remember where the heck that came off of, because that's fairly important. If the belt breaks, it will shut the machine down, and you want that to happen, or at least the manufacturers want that to happen. It makes sense too. If the drum's not turning, what's the point of even putting heat to it? Because things aren't going to get dry if they're not tumbling. So tighten that guy. Watch on here too. Sometimes these idlers will have a washer on them. If it does, make sure to put that back on with the new one. And we'll get started on this other roller here. Okay, so put the drum back in, have both of those rear rollers changed and the idler. So we're like 3/4 done. So the belt that goes around the drum, what you're going to want to do is match it up to, just to make sure that everything is right, because there's so many belts out there. So I don't know if you guys can see this or not, but see how it's got 4 ridges, actually the 3 valleys, 4 highs, I guess. I don't know what you would call them, but you want to make sure that that's the same number on both. There is a name for it, I can't remember it right now, but that's what we're worrying about. Second thing is you can hold on to the belt, and we'll stretch them both out, making sure that they're actually fairly straight. Now, the new one will be a little bit tighter than the old one, because the old one's going to be stretched. It's been on there for 10 years. So, but it should be roughly the same size, which these guys are pretty close. So that will work fine. This new one is probably twice the thickness of the old one, but the old one could be just that worn out. You never know how it's been used. So anyway, we'll put this new belt on. Hooking it on, you just put it over the drum, making sure the drum is actually sitting on the rear rollers. And you can kind of lift up the front a little bit and make sure that that belt gets past the heater and the duct part here. You'll see, you can see right inside there. See, it's actually on this one, it's hooked on the heater here, so it didn't make it past. So you just kind of shove it through there. You want the belt riding in roughly the same spot that it was in before. So I tend to put it in that kind of location on the top, because you can see the wear mark of where it was sitting. And then it makes it a lot easier to hook on the bottom. If the belt's sitting way up here, it's too much tension, and it doesn't usually work out so well. So we'll reach in here, hook on this belt, everything's new. It's a little stiff to put on there, but so after this, what I always do is roll that belt, or roll the whole drum actually, a bunch of times. It'll make sure that the belt is seated where it should be. It's on the motor, it's on the idler, everything's good, it's not going to fall off, because we don't want to put everything else back on, start it up, and the belt flies off. Then we have to take everything back apart again, get to the belt, put it back on. So that's a little tip there for you. So yeah, we'll start putting on the other pieces here. The next piece that's going to go on usually is that front panel with the rollers connected to it. So what we'll do is put the panel just maybe up here, something like that. Usually I just put it on my bench, but it's easier for you guys to see this here. I'll move you a little closer too, and then we can undo these, take these off, replace them with those guys, and that is all we're doing for replacing. Then we just have to put it back together. So I'll wheel you a little closer. Adjust this just down a little bit. There we go. So using the same pieces we were using before, I'm going to use this 9/16 wrench. It seems to fit into there a little bit better. On something like a Samsung, you can get the crescent wrenches in there quite easily, but LG just seems to be really tight. I don't know why they made things so tough. So yeah, just put your wrench. Like I said, I'm using a 9/16 here. It's actually a 14 mil, but those sizes are close enough that it's not going to strip. It is better to use a 14 if you do have it, but my 14 has gone missing, so I'm just going to use a 9/16. So this is the same thing. Washer from the back side, washer from the front side. We're going to replace the nut because that nut's already been ran in, and the lock part of it gets kind of chewed up when you run it past the little plasticky part that they put on these lock nuts. So we'll use a new one. It's gonna grab better. It's gonna do everything basically better. So put the washer on the back there and put that through the hole. These front ones are so nice to do compared to the back ones. Those back ones are not, no joke. They're kind of a pain. They can be a real bugger. You can get it. It's not a hard concept, but it's just the spot that they put it in is such a silly area for technicians and, well, anybody trying to change their rollers. So this should be a little bit tight going in. That's a good sign that you're going into a lock nut, but you don't want it to be too hard. If it's very hard to turn this right off the bat, you know you're going into it cross-threaded. So you want to run it back out and try to straighten everything out and run it in again. That's kind of the biggest tip, because you don't want to screw up the threads on these. So with this other one, LG in their infinite wisdom decided to put the nut and everything behind this venting piece here. So there's 2 screws, sometimes 3. It's easier if you take out the actual lint filter to get this off. So you can just kind of pull down on it. It is, I guess, good to take this off well, not every now and then, but if you have it apart, to take this off, because there's going to be a lot of crap that builds up inside of here, And there's not really a good way to actually get to it. You can try to get to it from here, but you can't reach down up over here where a lot of the stuff just sits there and collects. So yeah, that's another little tip there for you. So I'll just put this upside down. Just watch that. What's that light that's down there? If you do have a light, some do, some don't. Okay, so let's go just like that. And like I said, it slides fairly easy to a point, and then all of a sudden it gets tough. Just watch kind of how everything's going on, and if it seems like it's going on fairly well, if not hitting anything, you can give it a little bit of force to it. But everything's got to sit kind of in a little bit of a track, so it's got to be lined up where that track is for it to actually go on right, which can be a really fun time, as you can see. So, and for some reason, this one is really tight. I don't know whether this piece is bent or what the heck. It's goes together fairly tough like that. I don't necessarily like it much, but that wasn't part of what was making any sound, so I don't want to bother trying to bend it a little bit or something so it sits better. If you bend one thing on these, it affects everything. So you don't want to do it unless you know, and you can see blatantly why it's bent and where it needs to go back to. Okay, let's try this again. So put that in. Hang those two top ones on, put some force on the bottom here, pushing it in, and we'll spin that drum. Sometimes it jumps on so easily, it's ridiculous. Sometimes you got to give it a little bit of force. We can hook these bottom ones on, do up the electrical. There's no screws down here to actually do on. So there'll be those four, and then we can start dealing with the top part here. Some screws are longer than others. So when you take them apart, if you have to separate them, do it. It's fine. Just some are just longer. Some are pointed, some are not. The ones that are pointed are just going to be the ones that go into metal on metal. The ones that aren't pointed are usually the ones that go metal into plastic or plastic into metal. Either way, you'll see when you're taking it apart. Just pay attention to the little things, I guess. You can put this lint filter back in. Make sure we put it in the right way. It's kind of a big deal. So now we have this part, and this is kind of a pain because we got to put that console back kind of here again and hook on this bracket. So just be gentle on the wiring. It doesn't like being ripped. So just hook it back into there, hook it back in on this side. Sometimes you got to push out a little bit on the side panels. The side panels are very flimsy, so don't worry about doing that. We can run some of this wiring back to where it needs to be. A lot of this is too tight still, so I can't really put it back into exactly where it needs to be. But you'll find a spot just sitting on top of here that'll be the nicest for it. So hook this light back on. Make sure you hook that back on because that light can get caught up in the drum if you don't put it back on, and it can rip that right off, and it can rip up the wiring, and it can do all kinds of crappy stuff to the boards if you're ripping wires out. So we don't want that to happen. Just make sure you hook everything back up. So 2 screws up top. Two screws in the front. You'll see the outline of where the screws were sitting, so you know you're hitting the right holes. Next, we're going to put on the front outer panel. That'll cover all this, and we can hook up the door switch. So there's 2 little tabs on the bottom here. You just feed that panel into those tabs, and then we can pull it up. Like I said before, there's little clips that hold these on, so you gotta kind of bend the panel down under the clips. This one's only got the clip on the one side. Sometimes they'll be on both sides. So we can hook these screws back in here. 2 up here on both sides. 2 inside the door. That's going to be the door one. Oh, sorry, there's just that one on that one side. 2 on the inside. Usually it's the shorter ones that look like they're made more for going into plastic. Sometimes they'll have a big washer on them, and that's how you know those are the ones that go right in this spot here. So put those in. And we can put that console back in place. So if you undid any of the wiring, you can hook it up now. Putting this back in, you just got to kind of wiggle it. It's always kind of a pain. It's usually more of a pain actually pulling it off than putting it back on. So remember those 2 screws came in from the back here. These little guys. Now I'm using a drill. I know I just said that was to make the video a little quicker because nobody wants to sit there for hours and watch a video. But yeah, usually I just use screwdrivers, handheld screwdriver, like a ratcheting screwdriver. It works. It works great. So now we have the top with the 3 screws in the back. If you have leftover screws, well, something didn't get screws put back on it. So you should have, at this point, 3 screws. Unless, like I said, some of these are different. They only have 2 screws in them, but this exact model has 3. So we can put these back in. Usually before I put this lid piece back on, I'll be testing it. In this case, I'm not going to do that. I want it to kind of show you how to do all this stuff before. If I need to rip it back apart for any reason, I can do that. It's not a big deal. So here comes the moment of truth. Plug that back into the wall. Turn the control back on. Check filter light is usually going to flash. You can take out the filter. Usually it'll go away, but when you go to select your cycle, if you're just testing, you don't have any clothes in there or anything like that, what you want to do is go to a cycle that's not a sensor dry cycle. So sensor dry is usually all the ones on this side here. I don't use air dry either, just because I want there to actually be heat to heat up all the parts and make sure everything is going to contract and run smoothly. So usually I put it on something like a speed dry or time dry. Time dry is usually the best because then you can just kind of make it 5 minutes and let it run. So let's hit start, and wow, that's actually really nice. Yeah, you can hear a little bit of the stuff jumping around in the vent, and what you'll find is now that we stirred up all of the dust in there, like I had already taken this all apart and vacuumed it all out, but you stir up all that dust in there, even if you remove as much of it as you can, a lot of it ends up inside the heater. And then when you're testing it like this, it will burn off all that dust that went in there. So don't be alarmed if it actually smells kind of like it's burning a little bit, because more than likely it is. But it's all right. It's just burning off the stuff that's in there. So when I put on temp control, usually why I use that speed dry and stuff is because it's a high heat. I want it to be high if I'm going to be testing it, because you're testing the sound, which is why we replace all those parts in the first place. But you also want to make sure that the thing is actually heating like it should. So that's pretty much it. Yeah, every LG is kind of different, and this part box that I got isn't going to work on every machine. So if you're looking it up on Amazon or wherever, check with your model number, and I'll show you. Your model number is going to be right on this sticker. You'll see it. It'll be like a DLE something something something. Use that to search. Yeah, for your parts. It can be a bit of a pain because these parts, a lot of them aren't listed very well. You might have to even take your machine apart, and on a lot of these parts, you can see an actual part number, even on the plastic pieces. So you can use those numbers to look up parts also. Just put those part numbers into the internet, and usually it'll come up with a list of stuff that you can use. So I'm going to run this guy for a little more, and hope everything's okay. All right, so thanks for watching, everybody. That is how you do a rebuild kit on an LG dryer. It's not too tough, but it is time consuming. You do need to take apart a lot of things. But I think this video is showing you pretty much how to do that. So thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.